Yeah, thank you so much for joining this session. I'm so much happy having you here. And it's an honor because you have more than 10 years, 15 years plus in the industry. So I would like you to walk me through your journey, how you started, tools you worked with. And I know I've spoken with few, and most of them said they've been working solo. So maybe you're gonna be different. Maybe you worked with a lot of people in the team and more.
Gosh, where do I start? First of all, thank you so much for having me. This is such a nice idea, and I'm honored to be asked. So it really feels good to be able to talk. I'm a little bit out of my element. I kind of want to interview you because I have a podcast. I'm much more comfortable doing that, but I'll try. It's really interesting how I got into technical writing. I know there's a lot more ways you can get into it now. Um, but back when I got out of school, I had an English degree, and I said, "Oh, I'll just go to New York and I'll go into publishing because that's what people did." And I found out where the bus to New York was, and I looked up how much it cost to commute there, and then I looked up the salaries in New York, and I realized I couldn't really afford to to go to New York. It was just horrible. So I had a friend who had um, graduated right before me, and she said, "Oh, there's this thing called technical writing, and they have it at AT&T. Why don't you come? I'll put your name in with the contract house that I use." So, just like water, right? The easy way. So I just like just did that and ended up at AT&T, and T, and I worked on a big project, editing mostly. I started out editing and found out I liked it, and it made but what's fun is to talk about, because I had listened to your earlier interview today. It was so fun. And it's fun to talk about the tools back then because we use these, we were on Unix. We were using Unix. Like there was no, Windows. It was Unix. You were at the shell level and you were typing the shell commands and on these big workstations. And then if you wanted to format your stuff, you had to send it to the group of women and some men that were the word processing group. So it was a big drawn out thing, and people today don't realize how lucky they are that it's so much quicker now.
Yeah, yeah, it is. It is.
Yeah.
So what
So
year?
the what?
What year? What year? Was it 1980 something or 1997?
Yeah, it was like I think it was 1982.
Whoa.
Mhm. I don't usually talk about
Whoa.
how old I am because I'm still working and I'm trying to get work. So
Yeah. Yeah,
it's
like
very weird
myself, I
out
think.
there for people who are older, but that's okay. Um yeah, so I just stayed in that world, that AT&T world, and there was lots of work. And I ended up working with engineers at Western Electric, and I did big hardware user guides, like big ones. But even that was so archaic. The way we had to do it was, and I'll make it brief. But I was writing it down today because I didn't remember all the steps, and I was like, he won't believe this. We had to do the text, and it was TROF or NROF, which is TROF is typeset runoff, and NROF is I don't know runoff. And what it is early markup language, a lot like HTML, like a rudimentary HTML. So you had to. It wasn't WYSIWYG. Like it was. There was no help though. You were editing the code for your document on the screen, so you had to know it, and you didn't know what it looked like until you printed it. And because these were typeset, they went to another location where they had this giant ABS 5, they called it, giant ABS 5 typeset printer, and they would print it for you, run it off, send it back. You got these big shiny typeset pages that you had to proof, and if there were mistakes you had to send them back. And then you had to, this is the part you won't believe, nobody believes it, I can barely believe it, you had to paste it up on boards. Like they were very, very thin. Like have you ever seen poster board? But very thin version of that, which had margins that were marked. They were pre-marked so that you could cut it using one of those big paper cutters, and you could trim it, and then you put it through a waxer, which was like a roller, and it waxed the back of the page, and you rolled it smooth. And I did that 150 times because there's 150 pages.
Whoa.
So people should really appreciate how quick things are now. But I have to tell you something, Wisdom. I feel like when you have been through that, you understand so much more about what goes into making a book and you just have these analog ways of looking at things. You understand the process. Like when WYSIWYG came about and when Word and the whole, you know, easy GUIs came about for word processing, I appreciated it, I think, in a different way because I understood. Well, first of all, I missed being at the shell level because once you're on Unix, it's hard to go away from Unix. I missed just getting in there and doing what you needed to do. I felt like Word was in my way. I felt like these, the new PC things were in my way. So that was weird. But I think that you just understand the process better, how it goes together. So yeah, that was crazy. That took a long time. Oh, and then you had to send the whole set of boards to another place, physical boards, and you sent them. This was a little old fashioned even for then. This was like late 80s. They're like, what are you doing? But they had always done it that way. And so a lot of the stuff that I did in that time period was hand delivered. You had to have like a delivery person on speed dial, right? Because you didn't have giant PDF files and email. You had some email, but it was different. So that's one funny thing I did.
Whoa. That's that's a lot to take in.
That's crazy,
Well, like you
right?
say, no, no, it is because I can't imagine
Yeah,
rolling
yeah. But
150 and you have to do it.
but in another way, it made me understand how something comes together and the whole process. So that was kind of nice. And then I ended up after that, I was on a magazine, a technical magazine at Bellcore, Bell Communications Research. And the funny thing about that story was we were still on Unix because that was like an AT&T thing. And I love Unix. Oh my gosh, I love Linux. I love Unix. It's the best. Um, but the cool thing about this, again, is I already knew nroff, I already knew troff, I already knew the commands, I knew the markup language, and I still didn't have WYSIWYG, so I had to know them well because I had to know what it would look like when I printed it, which really helped me learn HTML. Like everybody's like, oh, HTML, HTML, and I was like, it's just nroff, it's just troff. I've been doing it for years. So that really helped. That helped a lot. Having that, I would say in general, I noticed that you do both things, right? You're a tech writer and a software programmer. You're a developer. I think that that is so cool and the way to go because when you have that technical background, you have that different way of looking. And that's what happened with me inadvertently because I was so much on Unix and I ended up doing shell programming and then I ended up doing a little more programming and something called Lisp, if you've ever heard of modified Lisp.
I've
Um,
not.
and then I just think it helps you understand, in general, what's behind everything. And it helps you be a little more informed when you're asking questions as a writer. It's been really good for me. That whole background, that whole AT&T background has been really good.
Okay, yeah,
That's
that's cool.
Yeah, that's not even on my resume because I'm so old. I chop it off at like 10 or 11 years. All the good stuff from way back then. It's not even on my resume, but that's okay. It informs me. I got so technical and so into what I was doing that they made me a systems engineer and they hired me as a member of technical staff at Lucent, which, AT&T and Lucent split. And it was amazing because I immediately, back then, you just didn't get as much respect as a tech writer.
Yes.
So I immediately got more respect. So I was called a systems engineer, which is really just a business analyst. I don't know why they called it a systems engineer, but at AT&T, that's what they called it.
Okay,
Sorry, I'm
that's
going
cool.
to silence this. But that was like its own world, the AT&T world, and I was in that world for a long time. And they were ahead of everybody else as far as like IT, networking, version control. I got some really good technical knowledge and background from that whole experience.
Well, that's cool. That's cool. I think you started from way back. You've worked with the paper style, and you've seen the whole changes. And also, like you said, it's very important for the technical writers to be into the technical part. They should try to learn the ropes of the technical part because that would help them understand it more. And I picked up the part you talked about relevant questions because when you don't understand so much about the tool, you'll be asking, imagine asking, what is npm install?
What is
The
what?
engineer will get no, as in imagine asking an engineer what is npm install. The engineer will be so tired.
I think back, I think I asked some dumb questions. Yeah. It's like, you just, when you're starting out, you just don't know what to ask. So yeah, I think you ask better questions when you're more technical and a little more informed.
Okay, so concerning the AI tools that are in place right now, and taking it back then that new tools came up. So were there any time you felt technical writers had that risk of losing their jobs because of one tool or new stuff that came up? Just like AI right now, everybody's scared that AI is going to take some jobs. So did any tool or technology bring that fear to technical writers back then?
That's a good question. Um, I lost my job because of the telecom kind of crash. Like there was an industry crash in around 2001, and I got laid off from the contract job I had, and it didn't come back for about 5 years. I knew people that went to work at, Bloomingdale's or went back to teaching. It was tough. So that was tough. Um, the other thing I noticed, and people talk about this, there's different times when it becomes fashionable for, we'll have our developers write our documentation. And I think that affects, the tech writer market. And that never seems to last. It's like, although I think there's like a real merging now of people that have skills like you do that do both. Um, and I consider myself a technical underline the technical writer. And I think that, so I rode out that wave pretty well. Like I, can do whatever they want, like, and I work really well with developers and I just seem to relate to them.
Okay,
But
that's cool.
now it's different, right? AI is really changing the game. The hiring game too. I've noticed it's a lot harder to get
Yeah.
a job.
Yeah, it is. It is. AI has changed. I know some companies are more invested. So do you have any advice on this AI? Like we have some companies more invested in the AI parts. They don't want to know if the content you have written or you've sent to them is good. They are checking if it's AI written, not even checking the quality. So do you have anything to say on that?
It's a big mess right now because people are trying to figure it out. I'm fascinated by AI, but I'm also afraid of it because I read way too much science fiction as a child and I know where it goes. It can be really helpful, I think. And I think if people are using it in an intelligent way as their assistant, kind of, where they're always, I did think there's an art to writing prompts. And I'm sort of fascinated with even when I do generative AI art, it really relies on me being a descriptive writer, which is so weird. Like that's the only way I'm going to get good art output is if I can describe it exactly. So it's like a brave new world. It can't replace artists and it can't replace writers. And um, my big thing, I write articles for Medium, and my big thing, and sometimes I publish them on LinkedIn, but I talk a lot about you can write, you just stop too soon. Like people have to learn how to edit. It seems like people stopped learning how to edit. It's like maybe they're in a hurry or they're stressed or whatever, but if you don't edit your own things, if you don't know how to do that well, you're not going to be helped by AI because you can't use what they spit out. You have to edit it. It has to be humanized, right? It has to be appropriate. And I see a whole lot of crap. I just read something this morning where the pronouns were all off. And I read something on Medium that was like the last couple paragraphs were repeated. So it's still kind of trying to find its way, I think. But I think ultimately it will be good. It will really help people because it will take the tasks we don't always feel like doing and help us with those.
Yeah. So on the part of editing, um, can you tell me your experience you have with editors back then and how you work with editors now?
How I work with what?
Editors back then and how you work with
Oh,
editors
very
now.
good question. Oh my God, very good question. Because I forgot to say, when I first started at Bell Labs AT&T, they had the old-fashioned structure that I think is based, they do it still in the UK, I think, where they have editors and proofreaders and assistant editors. And then you become a writer, when you've been an editor long enough. So that was still in place at Bell Labs, and they hired people with PhDs and master's degrees back then. And you couldn't just be a writer. So I think that really influenced me, where I had to do a lot of editing and I had to learn. I mean, I didn't learn these things in college, right? I mean, not in the US at that time. I didn't learn like proofreading marks, or I guess I knew some grammar, but I didn't know style. I didn't know Chicago Manual of Style. I had to learn that. And so in that, it was very publisher world kind of still, and I think it was great because people really adhered to a set of standards. Now it's like most people just don't seem to know how to do it, or they're using Grammarly, which is great. I'm so glad people use Grammarly. I use it. Um, can I just shout out Grammarly because you can get metrics as a writer, which I think is great because everyone else has metrics. Developers have
Yeah.
metrics, project managers have metrics, but writers don't tend to have them. And my husband's a technical trainer, and he uses Grammarly a lot to show that he's always at a certain level, that his scores are better than what came in. You know what I mean? Once once he
Yeah.
um once he edits. I think there's a sore lack of good editing now. I think it would be really nice if we learned how. And I've been very tempted to do a course on it because I myself had to teach myself and grow and learn and get better and better at it. And I think we could be better at it. I think we could reintroduce it. The thing about editing that drives me crazy is if you just take a little time and learn how to do it, it gets easier and easier, and then you're faster. So your writing is better and your editing is faster. But I feel like the lone voice in the wilderness calling out for
Yeah.
editing. It's just so, in the end, it saves you time. Like I'm trying to tell people, even when you write an email, if you use usability, that's another big thing. Usability principles, you use a lot of white space or bullet lists, or you use subheads that are bold. If you just you categorize parts of your email, you won't get a lot of questions. You won't get people coming back to you and saying, "What do you need from me?" If you wrote a clear email the first time, it's faster if you take that little bit of time to edit it. So that's like where I'm at about editing.
The editing book, when do you want to publish it?
Oh, my book. Oh, I just want to do I'm very tempted to do a course, like to teach a
Okay.
course. Yeah.
All right. So do you have a list of editing books that you can, list out?
Oh, do you still use books? I feel like people don't still use them. Like back in the day, I had like a whole library. We all did. All the tech writers had libraries. Um, yeah, I always liked, now I really rely on the Microsoft user guide, the
Okay.
style guide.
To get the
I
style
think
guide.
it's very complete. I really like how brief the procedures are. I'm sure there's a companion for API. I know you notice you do API writing, which is
Yes.
a great thing to get into. I was going to say, if you need advice about, up and coming writers, that is a great area to get into. As you've noticed, they always need them. And
Yes.
it's if you have more of a head for that, it's a great area to go into.
All right. Yeah. So what advice do you have for the tech writers with what you've seen in the 80s, in the 90s, and now? So what advice do you have for them? And with the changes coming, how this is?
Yeah. Well, I think you embody what I would say. you're sort of flexible. Like you have that, you do this, the developing, you do the writing. I think the one piece of advice I have is to always educate, always be taking a course, always be educating yourself, always learn new skills, because that's going to keep you competitive. And you know how quickly it changes. And I would say get deeply into AI, because whether you like it or not, everyone else is. And I have just found that keeping my skills sharp, those old-fashioned skills, like good, sharp writing and nice editing, that's taken me really far too. Still, you know, in 2025, people are really interested in how I make their writing sound. You know, I've noticed that especially people that don't have English as their first language, they're very appreciative of how I edit, because I don't tear their stuff apart. I just tweak it. You know, I just make it a little more clear. And I feel like they learn as I do that, and I don't destroy their voice. So I think that's a really valuable skill if you can become that kind of editor. When I was younger, I think I wrote stuff my way, you know, but now I try to preserve the voice of the person, you know, or the voice of the
Yeah.
department. Yeah.
Yeah. So you talked about you don't tear their work apart. So can you maybe tell me how the process works? When they give you the work, you drop some comments or you help them make some changes. So how do you do that? Not to tear the work apart.
Well, I'm a consultant mostly. I'm a contractor, so I do it the way they do it. So if I'm in a shop where they love comments, I'll use comments. You know, I'll just do a whole bunch of my own comments. If I'm in a place where they prefer, and I don't like this, but anyway, single source, like if everybody's working on the same Confluence document, I'll do that. Um, some people like PDF with notes. I think the point is you should understand the process. I just wrote something about this for my little company that I have about, and to me it seems very simple, but I realize it wasn't always simple for me, was how to combine, you know, if your boss asks you, please combine these 5 people's comments, or if you're the writer and you get 5 or 6 people's comments, sometimes they conflict, and you have to, you know, there's a record keeping aspect of that where you have to really make sure you date, like you keep a list with dates and everybody's comments, and then you work out if they're conflicting or if you can combine them, and then you do a review and they sign off. But there's a lot of ways to do that. If it's just a tiny change, I'll use email, and I'll just say, read this paragraph. What about this part? Like, just get very direct, because people don't have a lot of time, you know? Um,
Okay.
if you ask, my favorite way is comments, especially with somebody who's like with it. I had somebody wonderful at Verizon, and she would go in late at night and she would read all my questions in my comments. And by that morning, I would have answers to all my questions. It was great. So we didn't have to meet. We didn't have to make, you know, yet another meeting on our calendar. So that was great.
All right. So have you tried reworking a section and dropping a comment while you did that, or you just only drop comments and questions?
Yeah, I haven't really done much of that interactive stuff. I know people do it, and I think it sounds great. I think I work for smaller places, and they don't, they just, you know, they do the comments or they do the um track changes, which is a nightmare, but people like it. People like track changes. Oh, and FrameMaker. I love FrameMaker and I miss it very much.
Okay.
I
So you work
noticed
with FrameMaker.
some people still use it. I've noticed it here and there, but
People still use FrameMaker up to now.
I first used FrameMaker in 1996. 1996. It AT&T wanted to move everybody over to it, even the engineers, and they were freaking out because it's not easy to use it well if you don't know it. And especially to write requirements and things, they weren't used to thinking that way about a document, you know? And so they came to me because I had used it. I think I had used some early versions before that. So they came to me to ask a lot of questions, and I couldn't answer everything. It was new to me too. And I found an expert at Murray Hill at Bell Labs, and he came and talked to all of us. And I called it wasn't even Adobe yet. It was FrameMaker. And I called FrameMaker and said, "Do you have a user group? We could use a user group, you know?" And they said, "No, we don't in the New York area yet." So I created one. I made one just to help us, and I ran it for a little while. It was very helpful, and we all put our heads together and learned it together. So, and it was like Unix, which is a stiff, steep learning curve, but then you love it, right? As opposed to easy to use right away, and then you get bored or it's too much. You don't need those beginning how-tos. It was like that. It was like hard to learn, but then so great and so powerful.
Oh, that's cool.
I miss it.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, you should. So did you work on other aspect of technical writing? Like I know you talked about the API, which I also work on. Maybe writing of the user guides, the normal technical blogs, maybe technical proposals, another part. So did you work on other types of technical writing or just you
No,
worked
and
on?
I find it so interesting. I think it's just so specific. Like, I don't do API documentation. I could, but it would take me a while to get up to speed. Like, I deal with it as part of an architecture diagram. I understand its place as part of the system, like how it works, and I understand some of the protocols, and I know gets and puts and SOAP, and I know those things that I need to know, but I don't write the documentation. Um, and I think that's really a good point. You can't be everything. And I think what happened to me was, in spite of being really technical and writing lots of very technical things, like I worked on crazy things like the five ESS International Provisioning Guide for the Electronic Switch. A lot of stuff like that, like where I worked with engineers and it was hardware. But my happy place now, like 15 years later, is user guides. I love user guides, and I feel like even when the users are data scientists, I still really like to do the user guide. That's one of my favorite things. Was I did a model registry guide for data scientists, and it was super challenging because I don't know that vocabulary very well. I don't know, um, you know, I don't know machine language. I don't know algorithms. I don't know any of that. So it was really good for my head, to kind of get into that. But yes, I've done a lot of hardware guides and software guides, and I've done training. They when you're a contractor, they find out you're in the building. Like if there's a tech writer, it's like, they surround you and they make you do these other things.
Yeah. So that's cool. So concerning being a contractor and you talked about the engineers. So can you tell me your experience with engineers then and also your experience with engineers now? So what's the big shift?
My experience with what?
Engineers back then and your
Oh, the
experience
way
with
they
engineers
are.
now.
Yeah.
Yeah. So how you
Oh,
work with them? So what's the big shift? What changed?
do you think it changed?
Yeah, you should.
Um, yes, that's a really good question. It changed a lot, actually. They, it, there was like a partition. The engineers did their thing, the writers did their thing, and the writers were not thought of with the same respect, I have to say. I mean, I worked with some really nice engineers, but just in general, the function wasn't well respected. Like I said, when I became a systems engineer, when that was my title, I got more respect like the next day. Um, and also, developers were kind of like on a pedestal, you know? It was different then because, and they gate kept. What they did was magic, right? And we didn't understand it. And so they could kind of tell you things that maybe weren't quite right and you didn't know. So they were really like the keepers of the wisdom. And you saw that change a lot. That's the big change I've seen, and it's so interesting. As they became, they built interfaces that were more easy to use. I got to the point where I was working at Belcor. I was doing a service provisioning system, and I could do my own examples because they had a process flow sort of interface. So I was literally building services for telecom by building a picture, by building a flow. And so it took that mystery away, and the developers, they kind of came down a peg. And I think it was probably really hard for them because of that evolution. And it's funny too, you reminded me of something. When I worked at iConnective, which was like full circle back in the telecom world in 2015 to 2018, everyone there either knew someone I knew or or was someone I knew. All of the systems engineers that I worked with were women. I mean, I've had wonderful relationships with men, not to say that it's hard with men, but it was such a different feeling because I had never ever had all women. All of a sudden, it was like we were like just a team. I never even thought of it, like that they were like the technical people and I was the writer. But it was also because the writers on, that I worked with, we had a little team. We were all like 15 or more years. We were serious. We weren't like beginners. But
Yeah.
yeah, that was a nice experience because they had a lot of respect for us, and we got so into what we were doing there that we were considered the SMEs because we were so on top of the software features that they would come to us. Because we were writing like methods and procedures and it was brand new stuff, and that was, I think, really nice. Like that's the way it should be, right?
Yeah, it should be that way. So you work with people you feel more comfortable with.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
there were a lot
So
of older people there. There were a lot of older people because they knew we were building out a number portability administration center. So they knew that would require a lot of people. But then when we were done, we were just going to go into maintenance mode. So they would have to shrink. And they kind of told you that when they hired you. So they tried to hire older people who were like going to probably retire anyway. So we had a lot of older people. It was different. It made me feel young.
yeah. So on the hiring part, because I know it's important for me to know how it happened then. So can you tell me the hiring process then, and also advice on the hiring process now?
Oh, I wish I had advice. I mean, I just got a job and I think it was a fluke because it was so hard. I've never seen the job market like this. Ever, ever, ever. Um, then I don't even remember how we got connected with jobs. Like we relied on the telephone. Like people would call you on the telephone and say, recruiters did a lot of cold calls and they would call you and say, "Do you need a job?" And you would have to, I guess, mail them your resume or email. Eventually, we had to email. I'm trying to remember like how it happened. Um, I do have some advice right now for how to get a job because I'm really good at it. Usually, I mean, I just got a job, but it took a while, a little while, 4.5 months. Um, but the way to do it is to get your resume up on several sites, several job sites. Career Builder, Dice, Indeed. Get your stuff up on LinkedIn. Get your fresh resume up on all these sites, up to 5 sites, I guess. And then recruiters look on Monday, they start looking for new resumes the last 7 days. So every Monday I renew my resumes on all those sites. And you know what? It works kind of like a charm because you get calls Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, or emails. The problem now is that I'm older, and so they often want to have someone younger to grow into the job. So I don't even go after permanent jobs, but it's a great way if you're younger, to go to be seen. Also, I would urge people to take contract jobs because they can easily turn into permanent jobs. And don't say no. Like, just it's a job, and you can use your skills, and you can make good money as a contractor. And I just see so little difference now between contractor and perm. That difference, those differences are going away. So we have to think in a different way. We have to be flexible. And it is like a gig economy. I mean, you can have stuff on the side to help you be more secure. What I found disturbing was, and I think AI is doing this to us, I had a hard time cracking through um, the online system to get my resume seen, unless, because my resume's on these job sites and I've been out there for a while, so they see me. But for new jobs, it was very hard to get seen. I felt like my resume was never seen. And you would go on LinkedIn, people do that quick apply on LinkedIn, and already you go and you see that it was posted a day ago, this job, and there's over 100 applicants. So how are they going to even get to you? So it's really tough. I have seen people have a lot of success with just that good old-fashioned networking, like reaching out to people at a company that you're interested in, and just getting the word out in addition to trying to be seen online. I was going to say something about that. It worries me. Oh, ATS. Make sure your resume is formatted for ATS scanning, because it presents you. I think you've seen that, right? The output from ATS, like it presents you a certain way, and if you're not formatted right, they're not even going to consider you. So it's just different. And talk to recruiters. They're great. They're great to talk to. They know the market. They know, the client. They know the trend. I talk a lot to recruiters. I wish I had better advice. It's hard out there.
Yeah, I think the advice is valid. Talk to recruiters. Like for me, I always tell people, interact with people online, because
Yeah.
people you interact with are those that would give you the job. For me, I think the best way is recommendation, because I got a job. I was out of job for a while and I got a job through recommendation. So a friend of mine working in the company, and when there was an opening, I told her I'm available. She went in, told the team that he's good, and I got a notch. I think there was a job I applied for. I applied and I spoke to my friend. A friend said, okay, they will give me a referral link. So I applied again and I got rejected for the first time from the first link. And I got accepted for the second link, being the referral.
It's so
So,
crazy, but that's such a good point. If you can get somebody to recommend you, and sometimes you just need that extra, that extra push. Also, make sure you have references on LinkedIn. Like,
yes.
and those really help. I was wondering if anyone ever read them, but I got hired recently last year, and the guy said, "Oh yeah, this is so interesting." He said, "I loved how everyone said the same thing about you in all of your references." So people are looking. Some people really are looking. Um, and there was something you said that reminded me of something else that people do. Oh, and sometimes you'll get recommended. This happened to me. There was a job at Belcor and they needed someone to do online help. And I had never done online help. But I had seen my friend who I really liked. I had seen him at a Christmas party right before this. I saw him in December. The job came out in February. And he said, "Look, I know this is online help, but I know you can do it. You have a million years of experience. I'm going to recommend you. I'm going to put your resume in front of my boss." And I got hired. And I did. The funny thing is, this is really funny, Wisdom. I did online help. I mean, if you're a writer and you know systems, you can learn online help. But they were also transitioning to FrameMaker at the time, and they needed help with FrameMaker, and they didn't even know they needed it. You know what I mean? Like I was just there, and so it worked out great. But sometimes you might not even match. This obsession with matching exactly what somebody wants, your personality and the way you work on a team and your ability to learn new things is always more important, right? Than the
Yes, yes.
exact skills that somebody needs. Or, God forbid, the exact tools, right? Somebody said, "Oh, you have to know blah blah blah," and I was like, "Well, isn't that like it's like something right?" Some people are really attached to
Yeah.
those tools, those exact. That's that's silly to me.
Yeah. So thank you so much for the advice. I'm really inspired. So your story is so awesome. And for me, I know I've learned a lot, and anybody watching the video would definitely learn a lot. I think they've heard the part of your story of how you started and the advices you gave. So, do you have any last advice, general advice?
I really do believe in, no matter what happens, the AI, whatever, it really works if you stick to the basics. you improve your writing all the time and you learn new things, learn whatever you can learn. Like if you're like I became interested in knowledge bases, and just a little bit of effort, I really got up to speed on them and really got interested. So always be learning, because that will do you well. I would like to interview you sometime.
Yeah, sure, sure, sure. I'm available.
That would be great. Thank you so much for this chance.
Yeah, thank you so much. I appreciate it.